She was just 19 years old. My dad wasn't around because he was deployed halfway across the world in Iraq fighting as a US Army sergeant. Neither of my parents had college degrees. Neither of them were prepared to be parents, financially or mentally. Statistically, their futures, as well as mine, pointed towards paycheck-to-paycheck living, housing insecurity, and yet another generation of poverty. Yet I stand here today as a young woman pursuing a higher education, living in the tech capital of the world, with two parents who have both built themselves successful careers. So how did I beat the odds? I can say now that it wasn't luck. It was a powerful, yet misunderstood tool. It's one that's often stigmatized by our society, but it's one that ultimately helped my family break out of poverty. When my mom and dad realized they were going to become parents, my dad knew he needed to build a successful career for himself to provide for me and my family. He knew college education would be his first step, but he couldn't afford tuition. That's when he enrolled in the military, and after years of fighting in Iraq, he was able to return home where they covered most of his college education. But it wasn't such a straightforward path for him to be able to provide for us and finish his schooling. He would have to balance parenthood, a challenging endeavor in and of itself, along with full-time work in school, a challenge he knew would be nearly impossible. Courageously, my mother chose to stay at home to raise me, and most of our housing costs could be covered through my dad's GI Bill money. But that still left us with food, formula, clothing, diapers, and the many other necessities needed for a baby that we just couldn't afford. That's when my family entered welfare programs, financial welfare programs. These are programs funded by the government to assist individuals or families in need. There's a variety of these programs, but my family enrolled in things like food stamps to help us cover our grocery bills. We enrolled in programs like WIC, which helped to feed around 6 million women, infants, and children annually. It was programs like these that gave my family the opportunities we needed to ensure my dad could finish his schooling. Programs that gave us opportunities. These programs weren't charity, they weren't handouts for us. They weren't something we could use to be staying at home and be lazy. They were investments for our future. But that didn't stop us from feeling ashamed or embarrassed we had to use these programs. I remember being a young girl going grocery shopping with my mother. I remember the countless times she would go to pay with her EBT card. We would get disgusting looks or dirty remarks from others in line or even the cashier themselves. My mother felt embarrassed she couldn't raise us without assistance. I was naive and young at the time, but it rubbed off on me as well. It wasn't until much later in my life, when I was around 10 years old. I was at Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, watching my dad walk across the stage to receive his PhD. It was such a prideful and happy moment for me. I got to see what government assistance did for my family. It gave us opportunities we never thought were plausible. Today, my father works in the pharmaceutical industry, using groundbreaking CRISPR technology to combat deadly diseases like cancer. Government assistance gave my family the ability to change what could have been generational poverty into generational impact. It gave me and my siblings the opportunity to pursue a higher education. It gave my parents the ability to raise me in a household where education was prioritized, rather than sacrificed for survival. Yet despite millions of stories like mine, welfare is still stigmatized and scrutinized in our society. There was a study done in 2019 that showed around 30% of the US population used one of 10 government social safety net programs, like food stamps, WIC, or Medicaid. Research also shows there's around 11 million children in the US right now living in poverty. So if we know poverty is a large-scale issue, and welfare is a much-needed program in our society, why is it still stigmatized? I acknowledge welfare isn't perfect. Had my dad not risked his life in Iraq and dealt with the many mental and emotional setbacks of war, he may have never gotten ahead enough to afford his college education. Welfare critics tend to point to abuse, dependency, and inefficiencies in the system. Although these concerns may not be unfounded, eliminating welfare isn't the answer. Instead, I ask, how can we improve these programs? What if we created a system that actively invested in people who invested in themselves? A system that connected dependents to job opportunities to ensure the next generation could be successful. A system that taught financial literacy to recipients to to ensure they proactively spend money they receive? And what if we created a system that worked to keep people out of poverty, rather than just provide temporary assistance? I stand here today not to just advocate for welfare reform, but to challenge us all to think bigger. How do we ensure the architects of our tomorrow aren't born into unbreakable cycles like generational poverty? I think back to my dad and how different our lives would have been had we not used government assistance. I think of how many other young, brilliant minds there are out there that are being held back financially. I think of the person out there who has the potential to perform life-saving surgeries that can't afford the food on their table, let alone medical school. I think of the next Michael Jordan who can't afford the roof over their head, let alone paying to play in college. Shouldn't we strive for a society where opportunities aren't exclusive, where people aren't destined to repeat history, but can be determined to write their own futures? Empowering tomorrow starts with recognizing that programs like these are not a charity. They don't just give out handouts. They can build foundations for success if we strengthen these programs. They can give people opportunities, and they can create stories like mine. I'm here because I want to use my voice, my experiences, and my education to ensure these opportunities don't disappear for the next generation, and to end the stigmatization surrounding welfare. I want you all to imagine the doctors, the scientists, the engineers, the artists, and the leaders that could build the better cities of tomorrow if only we invested in the people today. Thank you.